Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Monday night. Well, sorry, no, on the sofa. Hope everybody who went to Wrexham on Saturday has recovered. What a game. Just a couple of things from me. We had the fans forum last Wednesday, and as you know, all the ticket money and what we raised on the night, it was all going to Derby Rimmer. Pleased to say that we raised just over £500, £526 on the night, and with tickets, and that added to what we've already raised, that brings it up to nearly £3,000. So it's fantastic, and we've still got the whole season to go with our fundraising. So please look out for what we will be doing. One other thing we want to say, the Sir Tom Broadbent Lounge and Verologics have very kindly done a raffle for Derby Rimmer, which is going to be a table for 10 in hospitality on Saturday at the Crawley game. Tickets are £3. It's a raffle, so tickets are £3, which you can get to through a link on the Swindon Town site. So good luck to everybody who participates in that. So let's bring Vic on.
Chris, a very good evening to you. All right, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks very much indeed. SAS Travel. Now, we have news of them. Now, they open from just after 6. That's when they close tomorrow night at the County Ground, because, of course, our game kicks off at 7 tomorrow night against Arsenal under-21s. Don't forget, 7 o'clock kickoff. So they'll be open until just after 6. And they'll be open taking a reserve lift for Doncaster, which is a week on Saturday. So they want to get those coaches booked as soon as possible. So if you're thinking of going to Doncaster, get in touch as soon as possible. And SAS Travel open tomorrow night until just after 6 p.m. if you want to go to Donny on SAS Travel. There you are.
Okay. Right, so Vic, tonight we have Liam Walsh on with us, haven't we? Author of Red Balloons, the book. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Liam on, who is another one of us who's recovering from Wrexham as well. Good evening, Liam.
Evening, Chris. Evening, Vic.
Good evening to you, Liam.
Good to see you. Right, I'm going to leave you in Vic's capable hands, and I will see you a bit later.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much indeed, Chris. Good to talk to you, Liam. I have to tell you, I'm a notoriously slow reader. And this book arrived courtesy of Mr. Amazon. Other delivery companies are available, I should say.
They are indeed, yeah.
Yeah, and I have reached page 131. Most of this done yesterday and today, because quite frankly, I can't put this book down. I have to tell you how much of an impact it's made on me. And it's made me realise how sometimes futile things are just that. They're futile. And it's an extraordinary book, which you'll get onto in a moment. But Wrexham, Saturday, I think you've got a quote in your book that said, football is the most important of the least important things. And it felt like that Saturday afternoon, didn't it?
It certainly did, and certainly the last 5 minutes in particular. I think it'll take a little bit of getting over, really. And I think for me, 3 points Saturday would be part of that process. But I did leave the ground at the time, I think, with a sense of injustice as much as anything. I thought we played really, really well. And I think it's probably been borne out with some of the footage on probably the second, fourth, and fifth Wrexham goals. So yeah, really, really disappointed that we didn't win, but equally, as with everybody else, really proud with the way that we attacked, and to go away and score 5 goals was fabulous. But it cut deep for sure, the way that we didn't come home with the 3 points.
Yeah, they played some magnificent football, and I likened that first half to the first half of a game that you talk about in your book, actually, Leyton Orient away under Richie Wellens, and that to me was as good as that was. It was almost perfect, but of course we conceded a goal. But some of the football in that game was just magnificent Saturday, wasn't it?
It was, and I think it really does follow on from the other games that we've seen this season. I didn't get to Peter, but I think the 3 games have been, first and foremost, I think have been really good games of football. And we've more than played our part in providing the entertainment and the shots, and obviously the excitement that's gone with that. I think the refereeing has probably helped this season in terms of some of the changes. I think it's speeded the game up. There's less scope for some of the shenanigans that we're all used to. So I think there've been 3 fabulous games of football actually, with the 3 opponents of all our different styles, haven't they? But they've played their parts too. I think if the season continues in this sort of vein, I think it's going to be a hell of a ride.
I think we are comparing to the Wellings era, which, some of the football in that was breathtaking. So we'll talk about that in a while, because it does feature greatly in your book. And we should say, if you'd not seen the news today, Ben Foster's announced his retirement from professional football. So I think he realised on Saturday that maybe his time was up, didn't he?
Yeah, I thought he got a bit of quite harsh stick, really. I'm not sure the goals were down to him particularly from what I remember. I've not looked too closely at the defending that was in front of him, or which way he might be pointing, but I think it'd be harsh to blame Ben Foster for any of the goals in particular. But clearly he's had a great career, and he feels he's not at the standards he needs to be, and he's made probably quite a brave decision.
Sure. Now you're wearing of the Glenn Hoddle era, the potato print a shirt. Why are you particularly wearing that one?
Because it still fits. It's probably the most honest answer. But equally, I guess for fans of my vintage, that was another glorious period that we had, and the memories that we treasure from that time we hold dear and deep. And it still fits. It's still in the loft, so it makes the occasional trip to games. So here it is. Yeah.
Fair enough. And it was designed by Glenn Hoddle himself. So hey, why wouldn't you wear that? And Robert's messaging to say only Swindon could be 4-1 up at half time, and I didn't feel confident. Part of being a Town fan. Now, to me, Saturday summed up the experience and life of a football supporter, didn't it? There was the anticipation, the excitement, the joy, the trepidation, and then the ultimate disappointment. I mean, that's kind of it in a whole nutshell.
Well, yeah, and on top of that, we were booked to be on a train from Birmingham International, which was cancelled when we got to Birmingham International. So we had some thinking to go on our feet as well at about 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. So it was a job to get there before all the other fun and games started. But it was an incredible ride, wasn't it? I just think that the ref came out in the second half, and he was practically pointing to the penalty spot as he blew the second half whistle, I think. And to be honest, it felt like that through the next 45 or 50 minutes, didn't it? So, maybe, as I said, I think the refereeing so far this season has been, I think they've been helped with being able to speed the game up. I think it's helped referees, but just that 45 minutes on Saturday and the linesman didn't help too much either, did he? But I don't want to moan about referees and linesmen. It's not really what I like to do. But as I said, probably some scars will endure from Saturday for sure.
Yeah, sure. Yes. If you were a neutral, it was a fabulous game of football. Sadly, we're not neutrals. Now, let's get on to this book, which has received a lot of great reviews. I know it's been in things like When Saturday Comes and things like that. Tell us why you wrote Red Balloons. First of all, the title. I've got to ask you about the title.
Well, the title actually came really, really late in the day, to be honest. And I never set out to write a book, Vic. It was more a case of, given the circumstances that I'm sure we'll talk about, there was plenty that I found to write about. And before too long, I'd got 30, 40, 50,000 words in it, and it felt as it could potentially come together to be a book. And with the title, as I said, it was quite late in the day, and one of my friends who was also embarking on a similar sort of project said, well, what's yours called? I said, I had no idea. At the time, I'd possibly heard that the Nana hit from the early 1980s as 99 Red Balloons, and something about that did resonate with me. And it was mulling around my head, certainly enough for me to then to just go onto the internet and search if Red Balloons did mean anything. And I did find a lovely quote, which I will read out actually, rather than try to remember it. But I found a definition, which was that red balloons can signify how fragile love and happiness can be, especially the ease with which it is burst. And for me, given the circumstances around the book, that summed it up pretty perfectly, I thought. So red balloons, that was it.
Well, what an appropriate title, because as we know, we're going to get into this story in a minute, and boy, oh boy. Yeah, this book is for me. It says, me when I'm 75, slippers on, feet up, me. Now, cathartic is a word that's often put about. What was the whole point of you writing it? Did you say, right, I've got to go through this terrible time in my life, but also you've got to celebrate the people involved in this, haven't you? Which you've done very well indeed, I think. So what was your first thought when you sat down?
Well, that piece that you've just read there actually sums quite a bit of that up, Vic, as to why I'd written it. And it may be quite odd to almost dedicate a book to myself at the front there, but my primary reason for writing the story down was hopefully for me to be able to look back at and read in 20 or 25 years time and actually remember the really fantastic times that we've had, not just supporting Swindon, but equally as a family as well, and lots of other things come into it too. But you know, when I did think about it, I know it sounds really selfish when it's written down that way, but the primary reason for writing it was for me to look back on it and know, you know, and almost feel the depth of the passion and the emotion, which I think sort of run through the pages in the book and our life story, as for lots of other families too. But that was the overriding factor as to why I wanted to write things down, simply so that I could remember them in time to come. If that story then helps others or interests others, then that's fantastic too. Yeah,
there were lots of things in this book which I kind of took away from my own life in terms of loss, etc., and how you deal with it. I guess the thing is, you never really deal with it. It just becomes more and more part of you, doesn't it? That's probably what it is. I mean, I can see in the background there's a Sex Pistols poster and there's a guitar in the background. Football, music, racing, you name it, and your Irish heritage, it all plays a part in the fabric of your family, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I think, red balloons and the Swindon bit really is the glue that does bind the whole story and our family together, and our family story. There is other bits, as you mentioned, around, you know, the music and the Irish identity are woven in as well, but the Swindon bit is so absolutely central, and it would be for me. I was born 3 days after the League Cup final in 1969. So my mum had been to all some of the far-flung outposts of the time, and enjoyed some of those journeys, but she didn't get to Wembley because she was literally having me, you know, in the middle of the celebrations a couple of days later. So I was born into that expectation, I guess, and yes, Swindon has been part of my life really ever since, and with the family too.
Dare I mention it? You're the other side of the border, aren't you? In a county beginning with O. So, how was the preference early on then? Was there ever a danger that you might go one way rather than the other, or that was never a thing?
No, there was never any danger, thankfully, there was never any choice either. And again, if you're going back to those times, and there are still plenty of others in West Oxfordshire and other parts who do follow Swindon quite naturally anyway. But certainly back in those times, you remember that the other club at the other end of the 420 hadn't long been established as a league club, so it was actually natural for a lot of people in this area to go watch Swindon to see some league football. Oxford had only, I think, been in the league probably 7 or 8 years when I was born, so that came a bit later. And then probably that rivalry has become a bit more intense and tribal as those years have gone on too. But yeah, there are certainly plenty of pockets of Swindon fans in this area, and there always have been, and I'm sure there always will be too. Yeah, there are. It does have its moments. But you know what? They're lower league fans as well. They they have the same emotions and the same challenges and struggles and refereeing decisions going against them as we do. So I'll forgive them for that.
It's very kind of you to say so. Let's talk about, as with many people, your father plays a huge part in your love of football, doesn't it? How do you get involved in the game, and how does he bring you into the game, as it were?
Well, firstly, as a 4-year-old, being dragged up the rickety steps at the back of the Shrivenham Road, which was absolutely terrifying. And I'm not sure there'd be anything like that would still exist in the modern age, but they weren't for the faint-hearted. And I still feel a little bit queasy when I see pictures of the stand and climb to the top. So probably through the sort of early mid-70s, it was a bit sporadic. And for me, the 79-80 season, Vic, when we had there's probably Stoke and then Wolves and Tottenham, Arsenal as well, of course, all in really really quick succession. Were all just fantastic games for a 10-year-old, and if you're forming lifelong bonds, that's not a way, not a bad way to start that habit, is it? And I think I look back on my attendance stats, probably the 3 biggest crowds I've ever been part of in the county ground were those Arsenal, Wolves, and Tottenham games in the course of 6 or 7 weeks. So I think I was set for life from that point. And if I said I've not looked back, I'm not sure that's the right terminology, but I've been there or thereabouts ever since, for sure.
Yeah, sure. And in terms of those games, I said to you before we started this that Wolves semi-finals I still haven't recovered from. So Wrexham will take a little while. I mean, I've got 1 or 2 other things here. Rob says, for us, the club has been a family bond since my late father started taking me to the county ground as a very small boy in circa 1950. It's been a journey with joy and sadness. And Tony says, I was born in something, but I never, but I followed my father to Swindon, never regretted it. Well, there are moments, but hey, you get over those, don't you? You mentioned Tottenham there, and you were also, your bedroom was festooned with Liverpool posters, wasn't it? And so, I guess at that time, of course, Liverpool were the team. They were winning everything. How did that love affair start?
I guess it was, there wasn't too much football on the telly at that time. And every kid in short trousers is going to pick a team. And, I loved Keegan, Dalglish and the rest of them that followed, really. And I thought, Kenny Dalglish was just favourite player at the time, and it just felt natural to extend that to Liverpool. But it was really a passing moment rather than anything that was too deep. So the only time I've ever been to Anfield was when we played there in the Premier League. So it was an enormous long time ago for that one. So yeah, first impressions, still have a fondness, but that's about it, really.
And Tottenham, a team that you went to see at White Hart Lane. Of course, you'd seen the match against Tottenham. I mean, at Swindon, and of course, they had some players in there, didn't they, which had a great mark on Swindon. Mickey Hazard, Tony Galvin, Ardiles, Hoddle, which you mentioned in your book. And then you began to follow Tottenham. So what was it about Tottenham at that time, apart from the magic of those names, of course, that drew you to White Hart Lane?
It was the magic of those names and those players. Funny enough, Ardiles, Hazard, and Hoddle, and I loved Galvin as well. I loved Galvin as a Tottenham player. They were the ones who probably drew me to Tottenham, and at the time we were a struggling 4th division team, and it was a once or twice a season treat to be able to go and watch Tottenham and have a day out at a big ground with a big crowd. And we went to some of the great European nights at White Hart Lane and absolutely loved them. Safe in the knowledge that we'd be at home to Chester or Tranmere or someone on a Saturday in front of 2,500 or whatever those crowds were at the time. So yeah, they were good times. I loved going to White Hart Lane when I could, and I did carry that on for a while as well. But before too long, I'll be back in my, the old North Stand on the Saturday afternoon in front of not too many others, and a different, quite different style of football as it was then.
Yeah, you made the point in the book about how it was great to go to these big games, but actually, there's nothing quite like being at home for your team, is there? Really, that is what matters to you mostly.
Yeah, absolutely. I was quite aware at the time that it was a privilege and a treat to be able to go and do that a couple of times a year. And I would be badgering obviously for one or two more, but that didn't happen. And I was equally happy and satisfied that I would be seeing Swindon 20, 25 times a season, even if it was, there were 2 or 3 years before Macari came in that it was a really tough time, and it was a tough watch. And even as a sort of a 13, 14-year-old, it was a painful time to watch the town, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was indeed. Charlie says, I was born in 2004, followed Swindon since 2006 with my granddad and his son. So all my life, basically. Hello, Craig. These 3 games in 79 and 80 were all magnificent, but the 8-0 win against Bury, which got a mention on Match of the Day that night, was a highlight. That was a game, I have to say.
Yeah, I didn't. Do you know what? I didn't go to the Bury game because my dad he played football at the same time. But I can remember as if it were yesterday, being stood in the clubhouse after the game when the teleprinter would tick over, and it came through, Swindon 8, brackets, then written 8, closed brackets, Bury 0. That was that was a really special moment, and I think that was sandwiched right around the Arsenal game as well, wasn't it? So it was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I missed that one, but I remember it in slightly different circumstances.
1-1 on the Tuesday at Highbury, 8-0 against Bury on the Saturday, 4-3 against Arsenal on the Tuesday. I mean, as weeks go, that was pretty darn good.
Not a bad one. Not a bad one.
Sean says, my dad missed my birth watching Swindon, so I was always going to be dragged to the county ground. Fabulous. Went to Anfield on the coach with my dad in 1980 for the 5-0 League Cup defeat. Some rotters had let their tyres down at the county ground car park when we got back at 3 a.m. Oh, that was a miserable, miserable night. So was it natural then that when you had a family, your family, your 2 sons and your daughter, were they going to be Swindon people?
Well, I could only follow on from the way that I've been brought up myself, really, couldn't I? So that's the way it works. My eldest daughter, she came a few times. To be honest, she preferred the night games as a youngster because she probably knew it's going to be a late night and she could stay up a bit later. She was quite as interested in the football and didn't take hold too much. Her interest was always horses and still is. And I think her last game was when we played Millwall at the end of one season, and there was a heavy police presence, including police horses. And she said, "Dad, will they be doing show jumping on the pitch afterwards?" And they, unfortunately, they didn't do that, and I think that was the end of her in attending the county ground. Again, the middle one, I think, came when he was 5, 6 years, and so he got his first taste and stuck with it ever since, which is wonderful. And Patrick made his debut when he was 2 because he had to, because childcare and his mum was off doing something else, and it was when we played Mansfield in a game that we could have got promoted in. I think it was late in the season. It would have been the Sturrock team, I think. And I didn't want to miss the chance of us getting promoted, and that meant he'd have to come as well. So he sort of moved heaven and earth logistically to cater for bringing the 2-year-old as you do. And he did come along, and he surprised us by. He asked about Christian Roberts, which was a fantastic thing for a 2-year-old to ask, but he was terrified by Rockin' Robin. Yeah. So it was a little while before we got him back again, but he got that Rockin' Robin fear. It stayed with him for a little while, but he probably started younger than any of the others.
There's a mug with Rockin' Robin on the background, so there we are. We took our grandson to Wembley when he was 6 months old to watch Swindon against Preston. I don't think he's ever recovered from that.
No, there's another one to the list.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, your boys, their love of football grows, doesn't it? And they were playing football as well. Patrick suffered through injury though, didn't he? He had problems with his knee.
Yeah. I mean, he was a really good player, but he probably from the ages of 12 through to 15. So he was he got a knee problem that we never really quite got to the bottom of, and we had quite a tough time with that. He had an especially tough time because all his mates were playing, and he'd have to sit out, and every time he tried to play, it would go again. And he had got to that point where they were finally ready to operate and do something with it. But he faced a tough time there.
Yeah, sure. You document this in terms of months, don't you? And it's done in a very, very, very good way, because if I might take you to one particular month, and I think you know which month I'm going to talk about, and that's January. Now, January is a bleak month anyway, but my God, for you, that was as bleak as it can get. Now, you were sort of toying with the idea of going to watch Tottenham against Middlesbrough, I think, in an FA Cup tie. And Patrick and Ewan did go. Take us through the events of that night, if you will. You were at home watching the game on television. You were due to pick them up from the station. I don't know how easy you find it to talk about this now. I mean, these events are pretty bad for anybody, but how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, well, we'll see. And it was, and again, back with the Tottenham bit, I'd not been to the new stadium, so I'd have, it was one that was on the radar that I'd love to go to. I couldn't go that night. It was one of those where it was cheap tickets, the FA Cup, and the boys asked if they could go, and we said, yeah, go and have your adventure, which they did. It was in the middle of one of the storms, a horrible winter storm, Storm Brendan, I think it was. And as a dad, as a parent, my main concern was whether they got the right coats or not to take, and whether they keep warm and dry. I was working in Swindon, had a horrific drive home, so I was quite happy to get home and just watch the game on the telly, which was a pretty mundane game as it went. And then spent the next hour or so sort of checking on Find My Friends as I tracked their journey back to central London so that they get the train back home for Marylebone, so that I could pick them up from the station and go on from there. There was a point they got back to the centre of London. I said to my wife, they're back in central London, so they're nearly at the station. You can go off to bed, safe in the knowledge that they're nearly at the station. And not long after that, their locations didn't move and they weren't at the station. And that went on for probably 10 or 15 minutes, where I got increasingly frustrated from a selfish point of view as much as anything, because it looked like they might miss the train, and then the next train after that would have been another 2 hours, and I didn't fancy being up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to go back.
Because we should explain, you had a very heavy workload at this time as well, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I was, yeah. So I was due, I think, in Bath in the morning, and I didn't want to be picking them up from Oxford Station at 2. So I was getting a bit sort of irate at, what are they messing about at, to be honest. And then Kate came downstairs on the phone to somebody. I couldn't quite make out what they were saying, but there was an issue clearly that Patrick had fallen, and I thought it was his knee. I thought he must have fallen and hurt his knee. And then I heard the word CPR, which didn't really register at the time. I just thought that doesn't sound good. And Kate said, we've just got to get in the car and drive to London. We don't know any more than CPR. And I, in my quite muddled state, I was probably thinking, why are they giving CPR for a knee injury? It doesn't quite stack to me. So that was probably the extent of I was able to understand at the time. We drove to London through the storm. So it was driving conditions were absolutely horrific. In silence, we couldn't get any answer from either I think the police who'd spoken to Kate or any of the emergency services. As I just gripped the steering wheel and headed towards the station at Paddington, which we got to just after midnight. We were herded into a room and told that Patrick had collapsed and died on the spot in Marylebone. And and he was attended to at the scene by passers-by. The medics were on site immediately. Hospital was literally a mile away, just outside Paddington Station, but there wasn't anything anyone could do. So from having kissed him goodbye in the morning and watched the game that he was at and texted him at halftime a few hours earlier, it was just the most enormous shock and devastation as to what on earth could possibly have happened. So that was where we were in the early hours of that morning, with certainly not a lot to stay in the hospital for, and it felt not a lot to go home for either. And it was, here's a plastic bag of belongings and whatnot, and turn the car around and drive back home again.
You sort of describe in the book about how there are headlights around and people are going about their business, and this is often the way with somebody who suffers a loss, isn't it? The rest of the world are sort of carrying on, not knowing anything about it, and yet you're at the center of this awful event. It's a very strange experience, isn't it? And we felt that certainly through the weeks or days and weeks and months that followed as well, in that once we'd got home and clearly there was no Patrick at school, we had to share the news fairly quickly for the community, really. And again, we live in Witney, so it's a sort of medium-sized town, and word would spread quickly if he wasn't around. So we had to tell people what had happened, and very quickly became aware that it wasn't just our loss; it really was a community loss as well. And people would still come up to us and tell us what they experienced at the time, which was clearly very different to ours. When we were in a bit of a very isolated bubble of grief and despair and shock, and trying to find out exactly what had happened. We should explain at this time as well also that your father isn't well. So you're going through the chemotherapy sessions with your father as well, aren't you? So you're having to deal with that as well as everything else. You had to break the news to your parents, for goodness sake, and other relatives too. That's never an easy thing to do, is it?
No, and they're the worst phone calls that any of us could make. So we had to phone my daughter at uni, and we had to phone our respective parents. And we were blessed, really, in that we got, well, the children got 4 grandparents, and we hadn't really experienced too much loss in our life. So they were the worst phone calls that anyone ever has to make. Dad went into hospital the next day, and he never came out. So I think it accelerated his demise without question, really. But if we've got any I suppose any sort of solace in that, is that it did feel at the time that they went together, and we hope that he was at a point where he wasn't able perhaps to understand too much of what happened with Patrick as well. So that was, I suppose, the straw that we would clutch at the time.
There's a game at Newport which you talk about as well, which is just after Patrick's passing, and tickets and things like that, and that awful thing: do we go or don't we go? What would Patrick want us to do? Describe what happened there.
Yeah, and exactly. What would he want us to do? And we thought, he was the one. I remember getting the text just a couple of weeks before saying, Dad, tickets are going on sale today. They're going to sell out straight away. You need to get on the case, otherwise I'd have missed it and we wouldn't have got them. So we got tickets. We thought we just felt we needed to go, and as much as anything, it's getting out, and perhaps getting out of the environment you're in and just going to do something different is sort of an overriding need as well. As it turned out that week, there was a message on social media saying somebody else who turned out to be, I think, out in West Wilts, out Chippenham direction, had picked our tickets up from the club just by mistake, where one of these things happens where they've given the wrong envelope out. So of all the games where we haven't got the right tickets, it was this one, and we thought, well, no, we'll still, we'll find a way of figuring it out. So the guy, very kindly took them back to the club shop. We drove down on the Friday afternoon to collect the tickets, so an hour down, and it was a time of, I think, for us it was an incredible. We found incredible connections to the football club, not just with, for me, 45 years of support and the dad and the boys and my mum and everything else, but also with the team that we got that season. The Richie Wellens team was there was a massive and very, I think, a very authentic and natural connection with the fan base anyway, which was treasure for all of us to experience that year.
Sure.
So we felt this really, really deep connection to the club and the team, and almost desperate for them to know how much they meant to us as fans in this sort of darkest moment. That we were so desperate to go to Newport, and that we would go to the club to pick the tickets up on the Friday afternoon as well. It felt really, really meaningful to us in that sense. So when we did get to the club, of course, nobody in the club knows the story around what we've been through. So we were in and out within 25 seconds of this quick swap of envelopes, and it was job done, and we were back out again. But to us, it was one of the most sort of meaningful, one of the most meaningful transactions that you'd ever go through, in order to say, right, now we've got our tickets, now we can go to the game tomorrow on the Saturday. Which
it's funny because you described going to the club and the grass in front of the Don Rogers stand, and you mentioned that the infamous or wonderful puddle by the end of the town end, which we either dearly love or dearly want to get rid of, and it's one of those strengths.
And yeah, we were there for probably, by the time we walked from the car to the shop and back out again, we were probably there for 2.5 minutes in total. But that was 2.5 minutes of real pure emotion and as I said, absolute meaning and connection to our football club and what is important to us as people. For us, it felt really, it felt a really natural way to express what we were alive for, was to go and watch the team on the Saturday, which, as it turned out, was probably Michael Flynn's one of his early seasons at Newport, when they did play the pitch particularly well, and it was a horrible game, and we were meek and bullied, and Newport deservedly beat us, didn't they, on the day? But it was the atmosphere was quite offensive, and it was just a day with everything existing around us, and we were stood there saying, what on earth have we done this for? Why are we stood here in the worst grounds in the league, watching a long ball team bash us into submission, when we've got more, we should be doing more important things perhaps, but we were there. That was the choice we made.
Yeah, we often ask ourselves that question, what are we doing there? And then we just go back again. But that time, of course, a very difficult one. You'd lost your dear son, and then, goodness me, your dad goes as well. And then you found out another relative of yours is very seriously ill too. I mean, did you ever think, what have I done to deserve this in such a short space of time? I mean, it's horrible. How did you... I mean, with your father, I guess the illness was, your son is completely unexpected.
Yeah.
Your father was ill. So in a way, you can deal with that bit. But then sort of to find three people, these situations, how on earth did you deal with that?
I think instinct kicks in. So there wasn't a case of reflection or saying what we've done to deserve this, because we didn't. I don't think we had the capacity to ask ourselves those questions. So I think what we did try to do was sit down in the evening and try to eat together, and we would look for something positive out of the day. And sometimes the positive out of the day was, we're breathing, we're still here. Or in my case, and a weird obsession with doing 10,000 steps every single day, so I'd make sure they were done and ticked off. We would find something, Vic, that gave us the strength to say, yeah, that's another day done and another day ticked off. And that probably that kept us in decent stead, I think.
Sure. I mean, there are one or two really light moments in the book. I mean, I particularly like the bit about the ginger cat. We'd been to Cheltenham on the Saturday, scored in the last minute and thought we're going to win at Cheltenham. And then, of course, they equalised, and then that horribly dull replay.
Yeah.
But then the sight of the ginger cat, which is one of those things. I mean, I've had discussions about Brentford nylons, for goodness sake, when games have been boring. You know what I mean? But that's the sort of thing that happens sometimes. Things like a ginger cat appearing. The game's rubbish. Talk about the ginger cat.
Yeah, well, and we were set up in the top of the Don Rogers that night. There weren't too many there, and suddenly there was a ginger cat sort of stood beside us. I've got some great pictures I'd have to share somehow of just this ginger cat in the stand, which we to be honest, after I think we missed an early penalty that night, didn't we? And then it was not much happened after that. So we just talked about the cat really for the way home, and then it was one of the games just before Patrick died. So we played Crewe and Bradford in quick succession, and I spotted a ginger cat along the Shrivenham Road as we were walking to the ground. It crawled under a car, so I did follow it by sort of crawling on the floor to get pictures to check whether it was the same cat or not, which was certainly for Patrick, it was like, Dad, what on earth are you doing crawling under a car? You can imagine that the street was busy with other people going to the ground, and I'm trying to take a picture of a cat that's crawled under a car. So, yeah. So the ginger cat comes back, Vic. I know you got a few pages to go yet, but there are other ginger cats appear as well, and that's quite a nice theme for us as well.
Yeah, lovely, and it's a lovely moment with you all, isn't it? Where it's that sort of thing at football that kind of you remember and talk about for years to come, isn't it? And for you, a particularly poignant one, which you can keep in that's a nice memory locker.
Yeah. And I've got a bank of ginger cat photos at football on my phone as well, so they're up for interpretation at some point as well.
Yeah, Somerset fans will know the Brian the cat that hovered around the Somerset Pavilion, a ginger cat. Strangely enough, for many years. I don't think it's the same ginger cat. It would have been a long way.
Who knows?
Well, it might have gone from Swindon to Taunton. Who knows? So sadly, you lose your dad, who went at the end of January. And then you describe how I still think this is one of the best atmospheres I've ever experienced at the county ground. The Swindon against Exeter game early in February, top against second. Living near Exeter as I do, it had particular meaning. But boy, what an atmosphere. And you had an empty seat alongside you, obviously. And I think people say, well, why is there an empty seat on a game like this? Well, for the worst of reasons. But that was an extraordinary day, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it built, didn't it, through the week with Doyle and Yates returning, first against second. And even in the midst of everything else that's going on, I remember being captivated by the ticket sales, and we'd be checking all the time to see this is going to be 9,000, 10,000, 11,000, and suddenly we were on target with sale, which was extraordinary. And we had that empty seat there, and it was I had to say my son's died and my dad's died too, so that's why there's an empty seat. I'm sorry, but it was what a performance and what a game that was, and it did feel for us. It felt that it was that people had come for us. It was a little bit out of the blue, and it felt that we despite everything else that we got our club back. It took a turn. It took a turn again in the summer, didn't it? But it really felt that we got our club back, and we were onwards and upwards at last. So that was a really momentous day, wasn't it? And I completely agree with you in terms of the atmosphere that day, and that whole period really was absolutely tremendous, wasn't it?
It was, and sadly we kind of know how it ended, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the way you describe the funeral services and the support that you got from the communities, your dad had obviously a tremendous sort of friend circle of friends, your son too, his school, everybody around him. Those funeral services you've described in wonderful detail and very emotional, and music, little bits play important parts, didn't they?
Yeah, and if I pick one out, it would be for Patrick had got quite an odd obsession with Hibs in his last few months, which would have come about as a normal 15-year-old scouring the internet and looking at different fans and the songs they sung, and he'd come across Sunshine on Leith when I think Hibs had played at Hampden and won the Scottish Cup for the first time in about 250 years or something, and he just loved that. So when we'd gone to Salford in the away game that season, we were in the classic football shirt shop in Manchester and buying a Hibs shirt there, and he got Hibs stuff for Christmas as well. So we played Sunshine on Leith at his memorial service, and we collectively tried to sing it, which was it was a really poignant moment, clearly, for us, and it's a song that's, I think, stayed with us, and stayed with the people who were there and the people in our community as well. So that's always been a really special song for us. And if you see any Sunshine on Leith or Hibs stickers around in far-flung places, then they're probably ones that we've left in our travels in the 2 or 3 years since.
Fantastic. There's a wonderful film that's a Proclaimers musical, which I think is called Sunshine on Leith, and that plays a big part on it. So I don't know if you've seen it.
I might use a different word to wonderful, but I'll go with you on that one.
Everyone's a critic.
Yeah.
So, and your dad's service, again, he had an amazing amount of friends, and you lost a lot of those along the way as well. I'm reading this and thinking, goodness me, how are you doing? How are you dealing with this? Because it's like one after another. And it seems to me that you're an incredibly strong family. Is that true?
I don't know whether strong's the right word, Vic, but we did set out, as I said, to look for positives and to keep supporting each other and to keep doing the things which were important to us, really, because in those situations you've almost got a choice of giving up, or right, if you're not going to give up, then what is it that you're going to do to actually carry on? And we've all found different ways of doing that. We don't do the same thing all the time, but I think we've all looked for inspiration and ideas, and nourishment from others around us to actually to keep on. And for me, as it turned out, writing a book was one of those things.
Yeah, an extraordinary thing to do. The Cheltenham Festival. Now, I used to regularly attend the Cheltenham Festival every year, actually, with ex-colleagues of mine, and it's a massive event. This, of course, is the Cheltenham Festival. It's just before COVID really locks us down. But you didn't go that year, did you? For one reason. What was the reason?
Well, the reason was I woke up with a raging fever on the morning that I was going that year. Even though it was something I didn't want to miss. So despite everything, I thought Cheltenham is something that I will look forward to, and I'll go for Dad, because I've been with Dad since '92, and I'd not missed a year since '92 either. So I was sort of 30 odd years of being an ever present in some shape or form at the festival. So I didn't want to give that up. I woke up with a raging fever. I couldn't move. Tried to get in the shower, didn't work. So I had to give up. It was the sort of first couple of weeks where COVID was a thing, really, and I don't know whether it was or it wasn't, because we weren't tested at the time. But I was bitterly disappointed to miss out. But Neve and Ewan went on my behalf with two of my friends, as it turned out. So that was at least I was represented.
Because that again was another part of your tradition, wasn't it? About going to Cheltenham every year, parking in a field, having a picnic, all that kind of thing. Whether you win or you lose, Cheltenham's Cheltenham, isn't it?
Yeah, and from a horse and racing background as well. The actual racing was a big thing for us. So without being gamblers, it was a really special time, to be honest. Every year it was the end of winter, it was spring to look forward to. I would describe it as Christmas for grown-ups, because for me, with the Irish background, it was always St. Patrick's week and my birthday week. So I'd have the three. It was a fantastic week for me. So always something to really look forward to, and a lot of special memories made over the years with family and friends on that one.
Malcolm says, "What touching stories, Liam. Thank you for sharing. My condolences to you and your family." And Sean says, "Heart goes out to you and your family from myself and the STFC family." How important is that Swindon Town family to you?
I think that the connection with the club is immense. And as I said, that when we were really in the depths of despair, it was something that we felt really strongly. In terms of, I think in terms of some of the support within the family, that we're, as we said at the start, we're a little bit more isolated than Witney, so we're not part of the local Swindon community in that sense. We know the people from around here that we go with, but to be honest, we stick to our usual groups and our usual friendships, don't we? When we go to football, it's part of our match day rituals and habits. So hopefully being able to share this story, and it was on the front of the advert, I think, at the time as well. So the advert did support to and make the story a bit more widely known. But really, I just want to share. This is I'm sure our family story is not untypical or uncommon, in that in different shapes and forms we live our lives around who we're playing and where we're playing at 3 o'clock on a Saturday or on a Tuesday evening. It's part and parcel of who we are, isn't it? And sometimes when the worst happens is when you really realise the depth of that.
Nick says, "Wow, I've just ordered the book." So there we are.
Available in the club shop, I believe, or will be very shortly.
Oh, excellent! I'll get all the Grizzly details from you in a minute. Don't worry. So, and also, I think that what this book highlights is the fact that in a crowd of 10,000 people, you don't know what the people 3 row in front of you are going through, do you? You don't have any idea, because you're at football, you're watching the game. But the person in front of you, or the person 2 rows in front of you, might be going through the most immense sorrow. You don't know that. And that, I think, is what it highlights, really, that other people's lives could be really in some sort of, I don't know, a dark place. But we don't know that, do we?
No, we don't. But they will have, we each have our own reasons for being there, and our own, football is a release as well, isn't it? And like the guy who asked me empty seat, within 15 minutes, we were arguing about which way a throw-in should have gone, or whether somebody was offside. And that's it, arguing in the sort of debating, talking sense, rather than anything more than that. But equally, there is that element of football being a release. It's a communal release, and we, there's a deep-seated longing for that community and for being together. And there might be 10,000 people there, but we all bring different things to that crowd, don't we?
We do. And this is from Ian. All my love to the Walsh family from a Darlington fan. So there we go. Tony says Swindon Town are strong in Witney, Carterton and Burford area. There are lots of these coming in, so
that's lovely.
Yeah, you're getting some lovely messages coming in. We'll forward them on to you as well, so you've got them. In terms of you mentioned also your love of music, and there's a great bit in there where when we're at Salford and we win 3-2, your what you wanted to do was to go and get a picture in front of the Salford Boys Club, wasn't it? Because you're a big Smiths fan and you wanted to get the photograph, whilst other kids are just kicking a can around the road and go, it's somebody else. That's the sort of daft things we do, isn't it?
Oh, we did, yeah, we did, and then that morning we did, and felt, I did feel very middle-aged and conspicuous by wanting to do that. As you said, there was um, some local youths were just looking at it. There'd be another one along in 10 minutes time, but yeah, I'd never done that, so I just wanted to do it. And the pictures they turned out weren't terribly good either, so it was a case of it felt quite an odd thing to do, but equally it was done. Tick that off. I don't think I'll be doing that one again.
I always remember when we went to Stockport last season, we played in the 1-1 draw, the first one. We went past the Strawberry Studios where 10cc had recorded. And I thought, wow,
of course, yeah.
It's the Strawberry Studios. That's not too bad, is it? So how are you now then? How would you describe where you're at? I mean, let's be honest, the loss never goes away, and we accept that. And those of us who suffered loss, we all know that. But where are you, would you say?
Yeah, no, I think when you say it doesn't go away, I think you said that quite early on, and I think you said it really sensitively, Vic, as well. And I appreciate that, and it isn't something that not just in our situation, but for plenty of others too. It's not something you get over. It's something that you learn to live with, and especially I think when somebody dies out of order, as Patrick did, then that's can be especially tough. So we're here. That bit about Swindon still being central to where we are remains. All the home games and quite a few aways we can as well. So that bit is there. In the wider part of life, as I said, I had two long-standing ambitions that were part of my need to be positive. One was writing the book and getting the book published, and the other one was running the marathon. I've done both of those. So for me, it's like, right, I've achieved those. What's next? Who knows? So that'll be something that I'll be looking for. But I think I probably need something on the list to really focus on.
Yeah, I must mention the running, because park run it was a big part of you as well, isn't it? I mean, I'm I've done my share of running very slowly, but it's a thing which is addictive, isn't it?
Oh, it is, yeah. And if somebody had told me 30 years ago that you could run more slowly than you have to, and you can talk to people along the way and meet a lot of friends, then that would have been fantastic. But I found out maybe a little bit late in the day that you don't just have to run 3 miles flat out and then collapse and say, yeah, I'll give that another go in a year's time, which was probably my approach until I found parkrun. So yeah, certainly another one who'd put the hand up and vouch for the parkrun. Whether you walk it, jog it, or run it, doesn't matter. It's about being part of a community and a big part of people who want to be outside and doing their thing. So I think it goes hand in hand with football.
Yeah, I was going to say, I find a lot of similarities between the running community and the football community, because nobody cares how fast you run, do they? If you do a 10K in 2 hours, it doesn't matter, does it? Just the fact that you're doing it, people are pleased that you're doing it.
Yeah. And you can say somebody's run 10K in 2 hours has had worked twice as hard as somebody who's done it in an hour, in a sense. So yeah, I think for me it's a really, really special community, and I'm lucky to have the parkrun community and my running club community around me, for sure.
Buster, hello to you. Thank you very much for your comments. And thanks you very much for the way you've talked tonight. And thank you, Buster. I really appreciate those comments. Craig says, I took selfies outside the studio where Joy Division recorded near Rochdale's ground, and of the Marquis Smith of the Fall mural near Salford's ground last season. So we all do it.
Yeah, love that.
I got to tell you, I stood outside the Physical Graffiti building in New York for hours and hours, because it's the cover of Led Zeppelin's record. So why wouldn't you do that? And took pictures of it, and everybody was looking at me going, oh, there's another one taking pictures of it. That's the way it is, isn't it? Right. I did mention the fact that you would give us the grisly details. So the book is called Red Balloons, and it's rather lovely. Cool. It's got on the front, it says A Father, a Son, a Memoir by Liam Walsh. And there's a picture of the Don Rogers, the nationwide Don Rogers stand, and one of the floodlights, the red balloons. I can see you've got it in the background there, haven't you, on one of the pictures?
Yeah, it's over my shoulder.
Yeah. So where is it available? Who publishes it? And what? Give us all that stuff.
It's published by Halcyon Publishing, who are a small but very football-focused publisher. Great guys. So it is available direct from them. it's really, I would love to direct people to the club shop, because I understand it is available there, or it should have been delivered either over the weekend or hopefully today. So I'm sure it'll be there by Saturday, if not tomorrow evening. Other than that, Bert's Books in town have been supportive. Waterstones too, and all the usual places online. And again, if I'm shouting out for anyone online, it would be, you mentioned When Saturday Comes at the start. It is part of their subscription offer. If anybody who's wavering on quality football writing, getting a subscription, I think there's a really good offer, which you can either have my book or a T-shirt if that's your fancy.
Yeah,
clearly, we're on the supporters club show, so I've got to point people in the direction of the club show.
Yeah, marvelous. Well, I am a subscriber to When Saturday Comes, and I think it first appeared as an article in there, didn't it?
Yeah, and maybe the idea to just keep writing grew out of that single article.
Brilliant. Are you going tomorrow?
We'll see on tomorrow. We'll see.
But you'll be there Saturday, I assume.
Saturday for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, come in and see us at the Legends Lounge. We'd love to see you before the game. And have a chat properly, face to face. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I can't tell you how much. Well, sometimes you read a book and you go through it and you think blah 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 blah. But I genuinely have been moved by this, and it's made me think today. Do you know what? Some of the things in life, they ain't that important. Some of the things in here are important, and I think that's what I've taken out the first 130 odd pages that I've read of this book. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank
you very much
for the comments along the way. I really appreciate those.
No problem.
Absolutely.
But thank you very much. But it's been a privilege to have you on to share your story. But don't go away, Liam. We'll talk to you off air in a moment anyway. So thanks, Liam, for coming on. As I said, heartbreaking story, but lovely memories as well to go through. So thank you. It's been a privilege. We will be back next Monday. So we'll have the panel on discussing hopefully a nice win over Crawley. Welcome back some of our former players. And so we'll be on at 7:00 next Monday. Fools rush in at 9:00 tonight. So you have got plenty of time to go and get your cups of tea ready and everything until the boys join you. Okay, we'll see you soon. Bye.